Basic Arithmetic number 5, Fractions, Decimals and Percentages. In this lesson we're going to look at the conversion between fractions to decimals and percentages and the conversions from each of these three things to the other. The first we'll be looking at decimals to fractions. So if we have a decimal, then we look at the smallest decimal place value, which in this case is the 2. The 2 is in the hundredths place value for the decimal. If we look at this, we've got 32 hundredths. As a fraction, we can write this as 32 over 100. But 32 over 100 can also be simplified, so we need to find a common factor. We'll go into both 32 and 100. And 4 goes into 32 8 times, so we have 8 on the top, and 4 goes into 100 25 times. And these two numbers don't have any more common factors. The decimal 0.32 can be expressed as a fraction, 32 over 100, which when simplified would be 8 over 25. If we're doing fractions to decimals, we might have an example of 5 over 8. We can read this fraction as being 5 divided by 8. We follow the algorithm for doing long division. If we had to do this by hand, it would be 5 divided by 8. Right, well, 8 doesn't go into 5. There's a 0 here, which means we're going to need some zeros behind the 5 to carry out the rest of this division. 8 doesn't go into 5, so we carry this 5 over, and now we consider 8 going into 50. 8 goes into 50 6 times, that would be 48, and there's a remainder of 2. 8 goes into 20 2 times, so we write 2, and there's a remainder of 4. And then 8 goes into 40 5 times, we write that down, there's no remainder, so we find that 5/8 as a decimal would be expressed as 0.625. The next one we look at is percentages to decimals. The best way to approach this is to see if there's a pattern that we can discern. 10%, if we wrote that as a decimal, would be 0.1. 50%, if we write that as a decimal, is 0.5. 25%, if we write that as a decimal, is 0.25. Now, to help to discern a pattern, if I, for the first one, for 10%, write 0.10, and for the second one, 50%, 0.50, we might be able to see that actually the decimal place has been moved 2 places over to the left. So for any percentage, we move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So if I had a percentage of 37.3%, then as a decimal we would write that with the decimal place moved 2 places over to the left, we'd have 0.373. With decimals to percentages, what we need to do is ultimately the reverse process of what we did for percentages to decimals. 0.125 as a percentage would be 12.5%. We've moved the decimal place 2 places over to the right. 0.73 would be 73%. We've moved the decimal place 2 places to the right. 1.37, if we express that as a percentage, will be 137%, because we've moved the decimal place 2 places to the right. Now, when it comes for percentages to fractions, the key thing to remember is that a percent is a measure out of 100. 27.5% could be thought of as being 27.5 parts in 100. But we don't want the decimal place in the numerator. we have to think about what will we multiply the numerator by to eliminate the decimal. And because it's 0.5, the simplest thing to multiply the numerator by would be 2. If I multiply 27.5 by 2, then that would give me 55. But whatever I've done to the numerator of the fraction, I also have to do that to the denominator of the fraction. I multiply the denominator by 2 and I get 200. Now what we want to do is we want to be able to simplify that fraction, 55 over 200. 5 will go both into 55 and 200, and we'll find that 5 goes into 55 11 times, and 5 goes into 200 40 times. So 27.5% as a fraction in its smallest terms is 11 over 40. Now we could do other operations like fractions to percentages. The important thing to remember is that the fraction will be converted firstly into a decimal. So we'll go fraction, and that will become a decimal, and then the decimal will become a percentage. So that would be the process for converting fractions to percentages. Now, a lot of these processes that we've looked at here are actually simplified enormously, because the reality is, in an exam, you'll be able to use your calculator. However, it's still important to have a basic understanding of what's going on in each process as we convert fractions, decimals, and percentages.